as far as the old ancient megalithic structures and what are they telling us, and how I think that what they are telling us, they are all mnemonic device. I think that they were built not just for the people. I think the people that built them didn't just build them for themselves, but I think they built them because they knew there was going to come a time where the human race forgot this knowledge, and as Graham Hancock said, we're a species with amnesia. And I think that these people that were alive during the golden age and this the time when all these different cultures all across the world were presumably communicating with each other telepathically, and where they had all these megalithic structures that were in alignment with the precession of the equinox and all the other various movements of the heavenly bodies. I think that these megalithic structures were built for us as well. I think there was a conscious they were built consciously for us, knowing that over long periods of time the human race would forget who we are, what we are, why we're here, and they were there to remind us of who we are.
The Kodega is a guide and a storyteller, escorting you through the night, lighting the way, warding off thieves, ghosts, demons, and other oddities. Along the journey, his companions would often share with him the most curious of stories that he'd record in his codex. Perhaps you just might find yourself traveling with the Kodega and sharing one of yours.
Good evening. So tonight we follow some hidden breadcrumbs of artificial intelligence, all the way back to ancient India, to the Bible, and even to the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. My guest is Luke Anstad, writer, researcher, and the man drawing these astonishing connections between our hypertech future and humanity's sacred symbolic past. He's written for Graham Hancock's website, delivered presentations on ancient knowledge, and he's here to explore a wild thesis that technological singularity was always part of the script. Is AI truly new, or are we just playing out something much, much older? All right, everyone, welcome back again to Codega's Codex of Curiosities. I'm Rai, the Codega, your guide on these adventures. And I just want to say thank you to all our listeners and viewers out there. We are now considered an award-winning, multi-award-winning podcast, and I couldn't have done it without you. So I want to say thank you so much for supporting the show, and to continue to support the show. I would love it if you just share that. Share your favorite episode, and make sure you guys are liked and subscribed. And without any more, I don't know, pauses, let's just jump right into this interview, and we're going to bring Luke on right now. Luke, welcome to Codega's Codex of Curiosities.
Hi, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
Yes, I'm honored to have you on. And for those who don't know you, Luke, why don't you give a little brief introduction and tell us a little bit about yourself and where people can find you as well.
Sure. So my name's Luke Angstead. I've been studying the nature of reality for the better part of 25 years. I've written 3 books on this subject, 2 short books specifically on the technological singularity. Their titles are We Are It, The Return of Pure Cosmic Consciousness, Into the Great Beyond, The Return of Pure Cosmic Consciousness, and then the third book is a much longer philosophical uh, titled The Musings of Data Pew. All of these 3 titles can be found at Amazon.com.
Perfect. It's so 25 years. What got you into this? What was your was there a moment where you're just like, I need to dive into this, or was it just a gentle wading into the waters, or how did that happen?
Yeah, it started with just the basic philosophical inquiry as a young man, and asking the question, why are things the way they are? Why is there something as opposed to nothing, and why is the world the way it is? And that just from there, I just started studying a very broad survey of philosophy, religion, 19th century French novels, history, you name it, psychology, just studying various disciplines that on the face of it don't appear to be related, but just from sheer curiosity, studying all these various fields. And for the better part of 20 years, I really wasn't sure what I was looking for. When I was about 20 years old, 25 years old, 20 years old, I was in college. I came across Being and Nothingness by Jean-Paul Sartre, and he introduced this idea of the thing in itself to me. There's something that there was just something that you could, and really what it boiled down to with me is this idea always lingered in my mind of that there was something that I could put my finger on and say, well, this is it. And I wasn't sure what that was, whether it was God, whether it was myself, whether it was something else hitherto to be discovered after exploring all the great works of history. But I wasn't sure what it was. But there was a moment in well, before I get ahead of myself, in 2018, I started seeing these videos popping up on my YouTube feed pertaining to the technological singularity, and I thought to myself, well, that sounds really interesting. And in the back of my mind, I said, I bet it ties into what I've been studying my entire life, but I wasn't quite sure how it would. And so I started seeing these videos on the technological singularity starting in 2018. They pop up in my YouTube feed over the course of time, and it just kind of lingered in the back of my mind this concept of the technological singularity and what kind of significance it would have
Okay,
to my
and
work in everyone's life.
sorry to interrupt you there, Luke.
Oh,
Before we
sure.
jump too far, I'm sure there's a lot of people right now asking, what is a technological singularity? Can you,
Excellent. Great
in
question.
layman's terms, yeah.
Great question. So in 1950, the mathematician John von Neumann, who worked with Nikola Tesla in the Philadelphia experiment, he was the man who was it was first attributed to coin this term, the technological singularity, which signified the moment in time in which artificial intelligence and the thinking machines became so advanced that their ability to simulate reality. I'm kind of getting into dovetailing with the imitation game by Alan Turing, but let's just stick with John von Neumann. It was this singularity signified the moment in time in which technology fueled by artificial intelligence became so advanced that we as sentient beings, human beings, would no longer be able to maintain a symbiotic relationship with technology because its computational powers would just so far exceed our ability to maintain a symbiotic relationship with it. So this was in 1950. So pioneers in artificial intelligence, computer scientists, mathematicians already saw the potential of artificial intelligence and realized where this arc was heading in the first half of the 20th century. And they realized that this was going to happen in the not too distant future. So in this same year, 1950, that John von Neumann first coined the term technological singularity, Alan Turing, they made a movie about him, starring Benedict Cumberbatch as Alan Turing in 2014, titled The Imitation Game. So Alan Turing, another brilliant mathematician, codebreaker for the United States and British governments during World War II, he was credited with breaking was it the Enigma code or the Enigma by the
The
Germans?
Enigma code, yeah.
Yes. So he devised this thing called the Turing test or the imitation game, which set the parameters by which we would know when artificial intelligence acquired the precision and sophistication to simulate what we have hitherto called reality with such precision and sophistication that we as human beings would no longer know what is real and what is simulated. So these two ideas of the technological singularity in 1950 being coined by John von Neumann, the same year that Alan Turing devised the Turing test, they work, they go together. I mean, they conceptually they work together. When you put the pieces of the puzzle together. So I found it quite curious that this happened in 1950 with two of these brilliant mathematicians and pioneers in computer science. Now, when all of this came together for me was in April of 2023. So I came across this simulated conversation between Donald Trump and Joe Rogan that never happened. It was all generated by this program called the Joe Rogan AI Experience. Now, once you got past the introduction where it stated to anybody who was listening that this was all generated by AI, say somebody just skipped the first 30 seconds to a minute and they just jumped into it and they heard the AI Donald Trump speaking with the AI Joe Rogan. I said to myself, I listened to this for no more than 2 minutes. I said to myself, if someone hadn't been given the foreknowledge that this was a simulation, I don't think anybody would suspect that this was a simulation. And it just I felt like something like a linchpin came together or something came together and just kind of locked into focus for me. And I wasn't sure. I knew something significant happened when I heard this and I listened to it, but I wasn't quite sure what it was. So I let it percolate on the back burner, and I played this video for probably upwards of 100 people. I played it for an audience of 50 people at a political group in Sarasota, Florida. I played it in front of Rotary clubs. I played it in front of a friend of mine who's the CEO of his own cybersecurity company, and he's the most techie guy I know. And even unprompted, he said to me, he said, Luke, that passes the Turing test. And I said to him, I said, it does indeed, doesn't it? So I said to myself, first of all, how long has this technology been available? So this was the first time I saw something with this kind of sophistication introduced to the public, and we know conservatively that the government has technology well in advance of a generation prior to it being released to the public. So it begged a lot of questions. One of which, how long has this technological capability been in existence? But more than that, it's I started realizing that it had deep religious, historical, spiritual significance because, and this didn't happen overnight. It happened over the course of several months, and then my understanding just it it's grown into greater focus over the past 2 years since I first came across this video. But I realized I started asking myself, I started saying to myself, where have I come across this idea of a singularity before? And then I said to myself, well, I immediately went to the Bible and I said to myself, well, the Bible speaks of two singularities because in the book of Genesis, the formless void out of which the Creator creates the creation is a singularity of darkness. It's not stated in those exact terms, but it's definitely described in no uncertain terms as a
Yeah, good
singularity
point.
because out of the
Good point.
formless void, we get the world of duality, good and evil, light and dark, man and woman, separating the land from the sea, the heavens from the earth. It's a world of duality. And then I said to myself, well, the Bible also speaks of another singularity. So we have a singularity of darkness that introduces the Bible, and then we have a singularity of light at the end of Revelation, because the last three chapters of Revelation, where as the disciple John is describing the new Jerusalem as it descends from the heavens, and he also describes it as the new heavens and the new earth. It's described in no uncertain terms again as a singularity, but this time it's described as a singularity of light, because in the New Jerusalem there will be no need for a moon, no need for a sun. The gates of the kingdom will always be open. There will be no need for a candlestick. All the pain and suffering in this veil of tears will be wiped off the face of the earth, and God will reign with those who trust and believe in Him forever and ever. And it's described as a singularity of light, and it's also describing the transformation of our world of duality into another singularity. So I started seeing these parallels, these alignments with what we're experiencing with technology in our smartphones today. There were definite patent parallels that maybe aren't. They're. I mean, you gotta penetrate the veil a little bit, and you have to they're subtle. I mean, seeing the relationships between the Bible and technology is very subtle, but they're definitely there. And what adds such power to this is that we find this in so many other traditions. I mean, for example, we find it in the Vedic scriptures, with the concept of the Yuga cycle, moving from a state of harmony in the Satya Yuga, and then over long periods of time, there's a gradual descent of strife and war and disharmony as we descended from the Satya into the Treta and the Devapara, and then ultimately into the Kali Yuga, only to rise again. So I got this. I started getting. I started seeing this sense of movement from one polarity, one singularity to the next, and then I started seeing how this overlapped with the precession of the equinox, moving through the 12 houses of the zodiac. I started seeing it subtly embedded into the thought of a lot of foundational thinkers of Western thought. I started seeing it in Plato's thought, in the trial and death of Socrates, as Socrates is arguing for the immortality of the soul. He's using his theory of opposites, where he start, and this is based upon observing the natural world, how I lost my train of thought, but just the cycle of as the as the night everything is working towards its opposite. So I started seeing the parallels from the singularity of darkness, giving birth to the world of duality, singularity of light. So Socrates argues for the immortality of the soul, saying that nothing is lost and everything is just always gradually being transformed into its opposite. So when we look at a human life cycle, we're born as a we're brought into the world from our first breath. We become an infant, we grow into adolescence, adulthood, then we reach our prime, and then we descend again. And we see the cycles. We see the cyclical nature of everything working its way towards its opposites. We see it through the seasons as winter gives birth to the spring, leads to the summer, leads to the autumn, go back to the winter again. We see it even in very prosaic examples when we take something out of the oven. We take something hot out of the oven. The first thing it does, it wants to cool off. We take something out of the refrigerator. The first thing it does, Is it wants to warm up? So these are prosaic examples, but we find them all throughout history. We find this in Friedrich Nietzsche's thought, that the concept of the overman, and that history needs to be overcome, and that he looks at the pre-Socratics in the 6th century BC, and he said that how these were the most honorable human beings, and he traced the moral decay of humanity from the pre-Socratics up until the end of the 19th century, where he said man had become such a herd animal that he had to be overcome. So this concept of people being sheep. I mean, people throw the term around, but it's a very old concept. But we find this in Carl Jung's idea of the shadow, where everybody has to somehow or another reconcile their shadow, otherwise it's going to be their undoing. And there are multiple layers to the shadow, but again, this idea of moving between polarities and opposites and finding harmony again all throughout history really started to line up when I saw this video between Joe Rogan and Donald Trump that never happened. I said to myself, this is a linchpin, and this is presaging something else that's coming. That something else is coming. And another parallel with the Bible is it's hard to deny that we live in a world of almost universal deception. At least when I mean, the power is there with the news and the propaganda machine, and it's damn near impossible to know what to believe or not. And we find those parallels in the Bible, because in the Bible, the devil is set loose in the world for a short season, right before this singularity of light happens. So, and again, we find the parallels with the thought of Socrates and Plato as the night is darkest right before the dawn. So a lot of these, when we separate these examples, they on the face of it, they don't appear to be related. But as we peer deeper into the mystery, we realize that they're all telling the same story in a different way, based upon where their culture is coming from. And yeah, I guess I'll throw it over to you, Ron.
No, I agree. No, you're saying a lot, and like there's always this balance. There's always like the dark and the good, and I agree with you. We're trying to, right now it seems like the time of the great deceivers. Where you're trying to figure out the truth from the lies, and it's so difficult to try to wade through that right at this point in time. There is. My wife and I discuss that often, where it's like, oh, this person really is speaking a lot of truth, but my wife kind of like brings me back in. She's like, yeah, but you never truly know. Are they telling you the truth right now just to deceive you, to take you off on a different way? But this is extremely interesting, this singularity, and I'm very interested in it. I'd love for you just to keep continuing, keep going
And, what,
on with
and
it.
what you're getting at, right, when your wife said that when you're watching something, they're making a lot of great points, but you still ask yourself, what can we believe, or what can or can't we believe? I mean, this whole mystery of life, what at the root of this mystery is the nature of consciousness, and how perception literally creates reality. It doesn't just influence reality. I mean, perception creates reality. And there's a great example in a movie called Sneakers that came out in 1992, starring Robert Redford and Ben Kingsley. Sidney Poitier was in it. River Phoenix was here before he left this mortal coil. But it's a great movie, and I don't know if you're familiar with it, but they were these
I've
hackers
heard
in
of it.
1992. Are you familiar with the movie? But there were a lot of
Slightly, yeah,
yes.
slightly. Was Dan Aykroyd in it as well?
I don't believe he was in this.
Okay, but I do recall the movie Sneakers.
But
Yes,
there was this movie between there was a scene between Robert Redford and Ben Kingsley, where Ben Kingsley's character was telling Robert Redford about how the world is created, and how the powers that be create the world. And he was telling him, he said it all starts with information, and then from there it starts with per- shaping perception, because he said, perception literally creates reality. He used a great example of the stock market. He said the stock market is a great example. He said all it takes is a rumor invented out of whole cloth to tank the stock market. You take a perfectly healthy company that is running with no major issues, and you just insert the lie, the rumor. You insert a lie into the rumor mill, saying that this company has major problems, or whatever the case may be. And it could be something specific, it could be generic, but you just sow the seeds of doubt with this company that otherwise has no problems whatsoever. But then people start getting suspicious, and then they start getting worried, and they're worried about their money. And stockholders start taking their money out of this company, and then more people start taking their money out of this company, and that puts in the motion a cycle of fear. And then businesses that do business with this company, well, then their stockholders get nervous, and they start taking their money out, and all of a sudden, you've created a new market from nothing, from pure rumor. So that was a very poignant movie that illustrates the power of perception. But getting back to the nature of consciousness and how that is at the root of this mystery of life, and that is how within the Vedic tradition of the Yuga cycles, what the movement of the Yuga cycles between from the Satya Yuga to the Treta to the Dvaparta to the Kali Yuga and then back again. Was what happens is it's the cyclical nature of consciousness and how we consciousness itself goes through stages of near complete ignorance to full knowledge of who and what we are. And the nature of I mean the universe is consciousness. That's what it really all boils down to, is that the universe is consciousness, that we are consciousness, consciousness is God, and that we are all avatars of God having an experience. And in the words of Alan Watts, we are God is playing hide and seek within creation, and we forget this, and then we remember this. And the great mystery is, well, one of the many mysteries is, why do we forget this? And I found that the reason why we forget this, it's in there are distinct immutable mathematical laws that govern this universe, and not only is the Earth orbiting around the sun, but our entire solar system is revolving around a grand center or galactic center. There are two authors of which I must credit this. One is an author who's writing right now. His name is Bibhu Dev Misra. He's out of Calcutta, India. He wrote a book titled Yuga Shift, where he gets into the nitty gritty on the relationship that our solar system has to the galactic center or grand center in our Milky Way. I don't want to misspeak. I'm paraphrasing this because it's not my field of expertise whether or not this grand center is at the center of the Milky Way. I couldn't speak to that, but there was a there was a corollary with from the Holy Science by Swami Sri Yukteswar, who wrote this book titled The Holy Science, published in 1894, and he mentions this grand center that regulates the cycles of consciousness that determine the Yuga cycles. So what we realize is that there were a lot of there were movements of the heavenly bodies, the celestial bodies, one of which is the Earth as well, and they are, let's just say, it throws a monkey wrench into the question of free will and religious guilt. And once we understand how this whole mechanism of the universe works more and more, we realize that there's a lot of it's out of our hands. There's a lot of it that we can control, but there's a lot of it that we can't. But I think
I
the
agree.
greatest contribution we
I do
can
believe
have
in that.
is to having conversations like this and sharing with people how the whole thing is connected.
I see. I agree that there are things out of our hands. You know, everybody says, like, I do believe we have the freedom of free will, but we are taken to choices. So, you know, we're kind of on a path that takes us to a choice, and we can decide to go left or to go right or go to straight. You know, that's our choice, but we're kind of on a designated path. And when we turn that way, okay, now we're going to be presented in the future with some new choices that are set out for us. Is what I do believe that that's the way things go. Sorry. Yes.
No,
Sorry.
that's what we,
Continue. Please
where do you
continue.
want to take it next? Where do you want to go next?
Yeah. So this singularity. You had said that possibly that there was some connection with, and I read that with the Sistine Chapel, right? So how on earth did
Oh yeah, that's a great
Michelangelo?
visual representation of it. Yeah,
Yeah. So
that's
how did
cool.
Michelangelo manage to paint the singularity centuries before it kind of became this word, this known word, this buzzword, I guess we might
That's
call
a
it.
great question, because how did he know what the human brain looked like? Because in the creation of Adam, you know, God the Father is reaching through the prefrontal cortex of the human brain to touch Adam's finger, but he doesn't exactly touch Adam's finger. I mean, as you see it, I mean, as their fingers approach each other, they create a vanishing point between God's finger and Adam's finger. They don't quite touch, and it creates a vanishing point. And it's that vanishing point that is the singularity, that is God. And whether or not those fingers ultimately do touch or not, well, that's still part of the mystery to be unfolded. But it's a great represent what Michelangelo shows us. So we have how much what happens when we go from one to two. So we have, you know, God the Father here, or we have God here, we have Adam here, and where their two fingers meet is the singularity. But what we have is, so we have one. Once we go from a singularity to a duality, So all has to go from one to a two. Well, then we have, you figure all you have to do is with every infinitesimal shift in your perspective between these two polarities, which create the world of duality, there is an infinite variety of experience and interpretations of those experiences just by virtue of going from one to two. We have so the most simple mathematical law going from a singularity to a duality, from a one to two, creates a world of novel potential where there is an infinite variety for complexity.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Like there's an infinitesimal type of events or occurrences that can happen when you go from a singularity to a duality. Okay.
But at the
Now,
root of all this is
yeah,
just it's God. But I mean, life is a dream. We are all avatars in God's dream, and it's God is having an experience because what else is there to do,
I
right? What else is there to
to
do?
yes, because if you're an all-knowing, all-seeing, all-being, you know, if you just become that, then how do you experience it?
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and I think we are the experiencers throughout this. We are the ones who are tasked with that task. Is to we need to go and experience everything that should be and could be. Um, Now, continuing with these artists, do you think that like artists throughout history were consciously encoding future knowledge into their paintings or into their artwork, or were they possibly like channeling, unconsciously channeling?
Oh, that's a great question. I think that I mean, there have always been artists, just like there have always been, yogis and holy Indian men and women that are just holy men that have always had that have had this knowledge, that have found a way to rise above the the level of collective consciousness of their day. So I mean, we did take a guy like Michelangelo. I'm sure he conscious. I mean, I can't say with absolute certainty, but I would imagine that he knew very well what he was painting into the Sistine Chapel, whether or not. And so, but as far as the language and technology and how technology works, I mean, obviously he would be using a whole different set of definitions and vocabulary and even concepts to express it. But he was expressing the same ideas with art.
Fantastic. And do you think that possibly if they do know these, are they like subtle, hidden instructional type of clues or works for us to maybe to learn from or to remember from?
Yeah, I mean there is there and there's it's the most famous book in the world, and it's pure alchemy. It ultimately is pure alchemy about transformation and reach and being brought to the threshold of infinity, and then just moving into infinity, and that would be the New Testament, and specifically the gospel of Jesus Christ. I mean, everything, all of the gospel is to bring is pushing the very limits of language to their most extreme, to the point where we are just brought to infinity. And like one of the greatest examples of that is when this is at the root of esoteric knowledge and wisdom is finding the God within us. Finding the God within our heart. It's at the very root of all mystery schools and esoteric knowledge and wisdom. Is how do you find the God in your heart? So Jesus, when the Pharisees are, I mean, they're talking to Jesus and they're saying, we're expecting the kingdom of God at any minute. Where is it coming from? Well, even before Jesus told them that the kingdom of God is within you. So you're not going to find it out here. You're going to find it within you. But just to take it to another level, he said it will come not by observation. And a lot of people say, okay, yeah, not by observation. What does that mean? But really, you really got to ask yourself, what does that mean when Jesus says that the kingdom of God comes by not by observation and it's going to be within you? It means that the kingdom of God is beyond the sensory world. It cannot be grasped by the senses. I mean, it can't be grasped by the intellect. I mean, the senses and the intellect can bring us to the threshold, but no one can we cannot enter into the kingdom of God with the intellect or the senses. So, in a handful of words, Jesus told us that the kingdom of God is beyond the five senses. And then even beyond that, we have when a little bit further that in the Gospel of John, he says that, and these are ones they're all designed to blow our minds and to bring us out of the shell that we've been living in our entire lives. So the next concept shattering uh, lesson that Jesus has for us is he says that that after he goes to his Father, he says that we, the creation, will do things greater than the things that he did. So he said you will do things and miracles and wonders that I have done, but you will also do things that are greater than the things that I have done. So here we have, in a matter of 12 words, we have God the Son, who is one with God the Father, telling the creation, the creator of the universe is telling the creation that they will do things that will exceed in greatness the creator. So I mean, these are all they're parables, and there are lessons that are just designed to blow our minds and bring us to the threshold of infinity and push us in there kicking and screaming sometimes.
I I agree totally. I agree with everything you're saying, and like if you believe in the Father, you can do what I can do but greater. And people find that sometimes, and when you talk about that, some people find that sacrilegious. They're like, "Wow, no, no, that you can't do that." But I believe it's possible, and it is. Now you also have said that I'm going to go back here just a little bit, kind of, well, I guess back to the Bible a bit, but um, you know, your analysis suggests that all has happened before. So like we're in a cyclical type of world here, and I had someone on recently as well, and that was his premise as well, and it was and the episode was called "Has Everything Already Been?" And so, do you believe that we're repeating these cycles? And if so, how many times do you think we've repeated this? Are there clues that are left for us that we have repeated this? We have been here before?
That's a great question too, because again, in the New Testament, I think there are 146 verses where it says that in order for the scriptures to be fulfilled, this happened or that thing happened. So it begs the question: why? What is the significance of the script of the net? Why is it so necessary that the scriptures have to be filled? I mean, are we following a script? I mean, that's the next question. So it does beg the question that is everything written, and I believe it is, and I think that I it leads to very uncomfortable philosophical things to muse upon. I mean, this idea of the eternal return, and again, Nietzsche wrote about the eternal return. He wasn't the only one, but this idea that everything that happen, will ring for eternity, for all time. So when we ask ourselves, how many times did it happen? Maybe did it happen an infinite number of times? I mean, that's it begs philosophical questions that are yeah, they don't
Almost
they don't have any
unanswerable in
easy
a
answer.
way.
Oh, go ahead, sir.
Yeah.
Was that right?
Yeah, I was just say they might be unanswerable.
Yeah.
There might be an infinite times. Like the Aztecs talked about. We're on the fifth sun. The other worlds were destroyed by fire, flood, I think hurricanes and jaguars, and and they have described this being on the fifth sun. And this is not the only culture who has described that. We've repeated this before, or we're on a redo again, and it's an interesting topic to get into. But what are your takes on that? What are your takes on like this global flood as well? What was that? Was that a reset? Was that a singularity reset, or to bring it all back to one, all back to Noah, and then start fresh from that point?
I know a lot of researchers that are much more versed in this field believe that signified the end of one of the Satya Yugas, and it kind of parallels with Plato's thought in the sinking of Atlantis. That was a moment in time where one of the I guess the most recent Satya Yuga came to an end was via a flood. So yeah, I mean, as far as these as far as it's happening over and over again, I don't know. I've never really given that one much thought. I mean, I think that if it's happened more than once, I think it's happened an infinite number of times, and it just rings for all of eternity. And as far as that goes, now as far as the old ancient megalithic structures and what are they telling us, and how I think that what they are telling us, they are all mnemonic device. I think that they were built not just for the people. I think the people that built them didn't just build them for themselves, but I think they built them because they knew there was going to come a time where the human race forgot this knowledge, and as Graham Hancock said, we're a species with the amnesia. And I think that these people that were alive during the golden age and this the time when all these different cultures all across the world were presumably communicating with each other telepathically, and where they had all these megalithic structures that were in alignment with the precession of the equinox and all the other various movements of the heavenly bodies. I think that these megalithic structures were built for us as well. I think there was a conscious they were built consciously for us, knowing that over long periods of time the human race would forget who we are, what we are, why we're here, and they were there to remind us of who we are.
but the worst part is that we forgot like the guidebook. It's like, okay, we see these great monuments, but they were to remind us of who we were. But it's kind of like we're trying to figure it out, and we're not. We have the Egyptologists who are set in one way and they won't hear anything else, and it's ridiculous because when all these new findings that keep coming out and they keep like refuting them and throwing them away and like, no, no. I think that they still hold to the fact that they were tombs for pharaohs, which is ridiculous.
Yeah,
It
it
is
is
absolutely
absolutely
ridiculous.
ridiculous. Yeah, there's no evidence for that whatsoever.
No,
Yeah, and
there's not. I,
yeah,
I I think in one pyramid in Egypt they did find a pharaoh buried there, and like I think that it was okay. We're going to put him in here. Like he wanted to be buried within this. That it was already existing. This was already an existing building, and they dumped him in there because that's where he wanted to be put. But I'm not even 100% sure on that. And I do know that in the Mesoamerica pyramids here, that they were used as tombs as well. They were used as other devices, but they were used as tombs as well. But not in Egypt. That was different.
were they used as permanent tombs, or were they used as Freddie Silva would coined it? They were for living resurrection. They were places where men and women went to become, well, first of all, they went through various rituals to purify their spirit, and there was a point, there was a stages of initiation where and then they ultimately went into the Great Pyramid or various other megalithic sites to for spiritual purity, for as that as well. So I mean, in a sense, there was a symbolic death. All they were tombs as far as having a symbolic death, and then to be resurrected
Yeah,
spiritually. So
it was definitely
he
it
does
was
on.
definitely along that line. When we
Yeah,
go to Palenque, they have the Red Queen there as well, and that there is this concept of the afterlife in the tombs. I just feel that some of them were repurposed. I almost feel that the pyramids that were built here in Mesoamerica were kind of like were used in a dual type of purpose, whereas the ones in Egypt, they had a single purpose. They were built as this one, but I feel that the pyramids here are in some ways more intricate. There's a lot more of designs and architectural type of designs put into the pyramids here. And it was kind of like they had this secondary purpose. It was as if like, okay, I saw this in Egypt and I'm going to build this here, but we're going to add a little flair to it almost. But they were, some of them, not all of them, were used as tombs as well. Like I said, in Palenque, they did have like the Red Queen in there. I think they used a lot of red ochre. It's interesting.
hmm Now, as far as I mean, you made an interesting point a few minutes ago. We were talking about maybe understanding how everything's connected. How it feels like we're getting to a point where people are waking up to that, but then some people aren't. And you mentioned the archaeologists who still believe that there was something where I was losing my train. You were talking about the archaeologists.
Yeah, how the Egyptologists are
Yeah,
stuck in a quagmire almost, like in this dogma, and they're just
yeah.
not
So
willing
what
to
I'm
recognize.
sure. So what I'm seeing is that archaeologists, and I know Graham Hancock doesn't like calling himself an archaeologist. He refers to him as a journalist, so I completely respect that. But some of the people that look at it and realize that the official story of history makes no sense whatsoever, and that they're but you guys like Graham Hancock and Andrew Collins and Robert Schoch and Freddie Silva, among others, just to name a couple, they're realizing that all of these megalithic structures are in synchronicity. They're in alignment with the movement of the heavenly bodies. So it's telling us that in that way, these megalithic structures are telling us that the universe is a single living, breathing organism, that where everything is connected. And then you have some people, even like from like the '60s and the beatniks and the hippies with the flower power and the age of Aquarius, and this idea that hey, we're all one, man, and everything's love and light. And even though it sounds corny and superficial, and it's still true. Like if you so when you just the closer you look at these mysteries, the closer you look at religious texts, the closer you look at the purposes, or the what we presume to be the purposes of the pyramids, of finding spiritual purification, and going through a form of spiritual resurrection. It's to find the light, the inner light, and ultimately it all does come back to oneness. There's a uniformity in all the disparity. It's everything is moving to one single capitulation point, with all these other disciplines that on the face of it appear to be unrelated. That the closer you look at them, we're realizing the closer we're looking at them, we're realizing that they're all telling the same story in different ways. And
I do agree. Yeah, it is all these different stories all in one, and I've said that before. I've talked to many guests who agree with that as well. It's like everything is all connected, and it's funny that you say, like this hippie movement where it's like, oh, we're all one, and I've seen a lot of these movements that are meaning well, but then they're subverted. They're taken over, and then they're turned into a perversion of what they used to be, and I think that's done uh, by textbook by the CIA. They do that with every single one. The CIA is completely funded by, I'm not going to mention who, or uh, they're controlled by another organization, but that is their purpose, is to fighting another entity, fighting a movement. It doesn't work. When you fight it, you strengthen it. But if you can get within, and then you could subvert it, pervert it, change the direction, and people will follow that. People become so blinded, like you were saying earlier, we're like sheep. People will, they started following behind a movement because it was good, and then it gets turned into something that it is not anymore. But people will blindly follow it because it they believed it to be good, and now they're not brainwashed. I don't like using that word brainwashed, but they're directed in this way. They're herded into this direction with these subtle changes, and next thing you know, they're on the wrong side of history.
well, it's eerie how the Brave New World of 1932, Aldous Huxley, and 1984, they've become such. It's amazing what they knew back almost 100 years ago, to what's happening right now. So I mean, there's definitely a plan. There's definitely an agenda, and I want to be. There's one more great example I want to get to before I go to my next point. But that is, there was a movie in like 1927. It was titled, I think, Metropolis, where a robot, like, do you remember this movie? It was
I. I've
100
never seen this
movie.
movie. I know what you're talking about,
Oh,
Metropolis.
I saw
I
it.
know
It's
there's
on
like this
top.
sleek robot kind of.
Yes, so in
Yes.
1927, there was a movie about a human-like robot that at the end of the movie was transformed into a human being. So this has been in the offing for quite some time. But no, so what is at the root of the global conspiracy? And I I've studied it. I've read all of David Icke's works. I've studied, and then some. And what I've realized is that and I've read so many different esoteric books. But what I've realized is that at the very root of the global conspiracy is God consciousness itself, because at the root of the great struggle of this age, and I came across this in a book titled The Book of Tokens by an esotericist named Paul Foster Case. He said that the great struggle of this age, and again, it has its parallels with the Kali Yuga, among others, but let's sticking to this idea that the great struggle of the age that we're living through right here is um, that consciousness itself has to slay its shadow. That the devil is merely the dark side of God's personality, and that's what we're living through. That God, Him, Her, itself, consciousness itself, is wrestling with its dark side, with its shadow, and it is reconciling its shadow. That is at the very quick of the first heartbeat of esoteric knowledge and wisdom. And it's at the root of this struggle of duality, of the of the battle between good and evil, light and dark, and everything else that we see expressed in our world of duality, that is grudgingly, slowly, and also moving by immutable mathematical law into another singularity, which we can only scarcely begin to imagine what that's going to look like. But we find the fingerprints of it scattered all throughout history. But at the very root of that conspiracy is consciousness itself.
I find that actually fascinating. That it is like it's the same thing. It's the shadow of itself, and we have to slay that shadow, and that brings me to something that I always say. It's like we would rather look at anything else rather than look ourselves in the mirror and face our shadow selves. And
We always want an enemy, and
yeah,
it's the enemy within us. And because we are avatars of God, and we have his we are made in his likeness, because ultimately we are him or her or it or whatever you want to call it. But that's what it is, and we that's what we see, this battle of duality playing out, obviously politically, with, call them what, Republicans, conservatives, or liberals, Democrats, which these words have no meaning. If you go back to the 1960s, a liberal in the 1960s would be a conservative today, and so these terms over time, they have no
this
meaning. I mean,
flip,
they don't
this
mean
flip,
anything.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but ultimately, it's the war. It's I don't even like using that word sometimes, but it's the conflict between our world of duality, and we see it playing out in the human drama, with all its unglory in the political arena. But ultimately, it's duality fighting for its last foothold on this world, and it will be vanquished. But once it's vanquished, I mean, from there, I have no idea what it's going to look like. I really don't. I mean, we have so much. There's so much beautiful symbolism that we find, especially in the Bible, and we find it in the Vedic scriptures as well, and other religious and secular traditions. So there's a lot of beautiful symbolism to be mused over and mulled over. But what is it really going to ultimately look like when people wake up to how the manipulation of perception game is being played, and how they've been being played for so long? What's going to happen? Because it's literally just an infinitesimal shift in perception. And once enough people have that infinitesimal shift in perception, we will literally see a new reality. And once that happens, it's really anybody's guess what it's going to look like. I mean, I'm
Like
excited to see it.
it almost could even be the world we're living in.
It could be,
It's
yeah.
just that we see everything exactly how we should, and I don't mean to be like, oh, some people are greater than others, but I believe that some people are almost there where they can actually see the duality. They see the both sides playing each other, and you can see this side and you can see this side. You can see the left, you can see the right, and you're just like, come on, guys, like see it for what it is. See the game that's being played, and you guys are the pawns that are being played for this. And it's funny you talk about duality, like when we have duality shifting, I feel that this is something that has happened many times in the back past,
I do
where
too.
it's like a flip of duality when when they talk about like the reversal of the poles, there are some cataclysmic events, but when you just were mentioning that the conservatives of or the Democrats or the liberals of the 60s are now the conservatives of now, there's another flip in this duality, and the chaos that it has ensued because of it is quite crazy. It's like it's very interesting to see this. When you stand back and
That's
you
a great
look
point
at
that you make with the 19. That's a great illustration where we can see how the role, not even the roles are reversed, but just how far the definitions we assign to words that play very integral roles in how we interact with society have just been flipped on their heads in a matter of 60 years. So we can only begin to imagine what's going to happen once the polarity is shifted. And that's what I mean. So yeah, I mean, there's more and more of us are waking up to the fact that we are it, that everything is conscious. Even stones are conscious to some degree, but everything in the universe is conscious to some degree, and to some level. So there's going to come a point where that becomes the overall overriding zeitgeist. But then over time again, consciousness will forget who it is again. So then we will eventually, and hopefully it's going to take a really long time. I mean, I think it's going to take a really long time in relative human terms, but I think that could be part of that's the cycle of, at least that's what happens on the temporal plane. I mean, so example, this whole game of duality, with the singularity moving to a duality, and with the infinitesimal shifts in perspective, giving an infinite giving birth to a world of novel potential with an infinite variety of experience. I think that these mathematical laws that are in alignment with the precession of the equinox, I think they only apply to the temporal plane, to this to the three-dimensional world. I think that even the concepts of space-time only apply to this three-dimensional world. So once an individual soul, a divine spark, call it what you will, once it realizes how the game is played on the temporal three-dimensional plane, I don't think you're no longer. I don't think a divine spark is no longer beholden to these rules or to these laws that govern this reality. I think that it's we're just we scarcely have begun to understand what of all potential, all possibilities. A term that David Icke throws around a lot, all possibilities. So I like to give credit whenever there's a certain phrase that sticks in my head. I want to give credit to who the originator of it. But I think we're really just scratching the surface of what's possible, and I think that everything the cyclical nature of our world, of our universe, I really do believe that it only applies to the temporal plane. I really do. I can't prove that, and I there's a just a mountain of maybe circumstantial evidence that I have put together with my intuition, but I think that everything here, I think it just merely applies to the temporal plane. I mean, once we cross that threshold into infinity, I think we're free
The
from
restraints and the
from the restraints that we experience in this reality.
or the limited yeah, because
Yeah,
we are limited in our perceptions as well, and
and I think
perhaps
we see that especially in the teachings. And here's another thing. This is a new. I wrote this. This is a new article I wrote for Graham that I hasn't been published yet. But like, for example, I mean, I think like the deeper you peer into the mysteries, the more you realize that what appears to be something that may appear to be a polar opposite of something else is saying the same thing. And I go back to Friedrich Nietzsche and the self-titled Antichrist and the most bombastic anti-Christian man who maybe ever walked the earth. But if we peer into his philosophy deep enough, we realize that his message is no different than the gospel of Jesus Christ. I mean, it's all about overcoming the restraints of the temporal world. And a great example that Nietzsche uses is he uses the idea of forgiveness and forgetfulness, and he uses there was an 18th century French revolutionary statesman who he said was incapable of forgiving people because he was incapable of registering anything as a grievance. He just clean forgot about it. So if we really think about this, I mean, what's the next stage of forgiveness? I mean, so much of our, I mean, the core tenet of religious belief and specifically Christianity is this idea of forgiveness and that we have to be forgiven by God. But it's not that terribly difficult to move beyond even the concept of forgiveness vanishes as an afterthought once if we realize it just what are we even why take offense to anything in the first place? I mean, if we don't take offense to anything in the first place, there's no need for forgiveness, and we find that parallel in and when Peter says to Jesus, he says, Rabbi, how many times do I have to forgive my neighbor if he sins? 7 times? And Jesus says, no, 70 times 7. So it's another symbolic, allegorical way of saying that forgive until you're no longer registering anymore. You're not even thinking about it until you move beyond the concept of forgiveness. So again, it comes back to this idea of I think that everything that we are experiencing and everything that we are learning and discovering here, I think it merely just applies to the temporal plane, and that's not to denigrate it or to minimalize it because it's a truly extraordinary experience. But I circle back to the fact that I think we're just merely knocking on the door of infinity and all possibility, and we're realizing that more and more as we realize how all these disciplines that on the face of it don't appear to be related. Again, archaeoastronomy and seeing how these megalithic structures are in alignment with the precession of the equinox and how we find that it's the that same alignment is in alignment with the great drama that is playing out in all of our hearts and souls and our minds. So we're realizing in so many different ways that all these different disciplines that don't appear to be related, they are indeed related. And I think that what it's telling us is that it's just bringing us to the threshold of the infinite.
well, I I love that statement. It's bringing us to the threshold of the infinite.
And I got to give
I
William credit. I got to give again. You got to give credit where credit is due. I'm just paraphrasing William Blake, and the doors were, when the doors of perception are cleansed, everything will appear as it is infinite. And there was a scholar who, William Blake doesn't get nearly as much credit as he deserves. I mean, Aldous Huxley obviously titled "The Doors of Perception" over one of the most famous quotes from William Blake, and then we got Jim Morrison and the Doors taking their name from it. But there was someone who said that for the given the in proportion to the merit of the work, he's the least read poet of all history. So let's give William Blake some credit. But yes, he said that once the doors of perception are cleansed, everything will appear as it is, infinite. And I think that we're seeing that play out in real time more and more as our smartphones are doing more and more things that appear to be magic, or things that even 15, 20 years ago we could not have even begun to conceive of. We're realizing we are
never would we know that.
yeah,
Yeah.
so we are participants with a beautiful, unfathomable, chaotic mystery that is somehow or another resolving itself into a new era, a new age. Call it what you will, depending upon what, depending upon your secular, sacred, religious, spiritual beliefs, or whatever framework you see the world in. We're moving into some kind of new era, some kind of age, and it's anybody's guess what it's going to look like, 10, 20 years from now. But we're realizing more and more in our own ways that we are participants in a beautiful mystery that the more you understand it, it just fills you with a sense of wonder.
It really does, actually, it
Yeah,
really does, and, when I was looking back, the '80s, the '90s, even the early 2000s, I could kind of see where we would be, you know? But I believe these last 15 years have really turned everything on head,
oh my
and
gosh, yeah.
it it's kind of like, where will we be in 15 years? I have no idea. I have no idea because, I feel that things are picking up. They're more intense. Like the speed of technology is increasing. I feel that we're being trying to be deceived more, but I also feel that more and more people are actually seeing the truth for what it is. The doors of perception are being flung open. But even
That,
that
that
being
knife
said,
cuts both ways, right? It sounds like what you're saying. We feel that knife cutting both ways, so we're being propagandized too, and the powers that be are trying to manipulate us more than ever. But then on the same hand, we see more people saying, "You know what? F this. I'm not gonna pay it any mind. I'm not gonna heed it any thought anymore." So yeah, it's a razor's edge. Yeah.
it is, and I feel like every day is a new battle, because even if you feel like I see everything for what it is, well, then there's a new, a new screen thrown in front of you to distract you or to see something that it shouldn't be. There's always something out there, and it's kind of like you can never just kind of sit back on your haunches and think that everything's going to be okay and everything's going to be taken care of. We have to be these active players within the game, always and continuously, and that's like it goes back to Q, okay, like QAnons. That is one thing that maybe in the beginning I think it was okay, but then this statement of trust the plan, which means you don't do anything, just sit down and just ride it out. Don't be an active participant within the world. Just sit back on your couch and let everything is happening that you want to happen. But I feel that is such a cop out, such a joke, because they're like just check yourself out of living this life and being an active participant, and just sit back and let things happen the way we want it to happen, not necessarily the way you want it to happen, but you believe in your mind that things are happening the way you want them to happen.
Yeah, it's a shortcut to thinking. I mean, trusting the
Yeah.
plan, trusting Q, and
Yeah, it is, and I've seen that so many times, and I'm not just talking like because that's the right, on the left. There's the same. It's all the same, and it's like no, no, we have to stop being lazy. We have to start, being part of this and realizing that we are all one. It is. We are all connected. Now,
oh,
when
I
you
know
went
some
back,
people who think JFK is still alive and he's 108 years old, and hey, maybe he is. Maybe have you met those people too? I mean,
I
this
have,
it gets so
I have.
ridiculous, and what I mean, I don't know.
There are there are some conspiracies that I do believe, but there's some that are just too far gone. It's like, well, I would dub myself a conspiracy theorist, but I'm not. I'm not buying everything because I know that, at least 30% of what is being thrown into the conspiracy world is completely falsified. It is done on purpose to discredit the conspiracy world. It's like, oh, I'm going to buy into this. Oh, that's JFK right there, and that's his son there, and it's like, no, it's like people have died. Oh no, they're in Guantanamo Bay and they've been executed already. Like, let's deal with here and now, and let's take action with what we should, and let's fix things with what we shall. But I do have a question though.
And
You
this
you
comes back to, and it comes full circle. With what you're saying,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
apologize
of
before
course,
you
of
ask the
course.
question, but this comes back full circle to what's going on with artificial intelligence and whether or not we've reached a technological singularity. And I do believe that
I was bringing
there's
it
no
back
better
to that
definition.
actually, so I'm glad you did.
Yeah, so there's no better definition of the technological singularity than the moment in which we no longer know what is real or what is simulated. And I think that we are definitely at that point when as it pertains to our phones. So I think that how is this parlor trick game? How is the will to power, as Nietzsche said, how is it being exercised by the world's governments and coordination and what have you? How is this game being played? It's all being played with artificial intelligence. And they've been using artificial intelligence for quite some time. I mean, in 1968, you remember 2001: A Space Odyssey. I mean, you remember that black monolith that came down and drove all the monkeys crazy and what have you.
Yep,
Well, you know
of
what?
course.
It was just it represented that black monolith represented an extraterrestrial or interdimensional, vastly superior intelligence that came here and helped jumpstart the evolution of the human race. Well, I mean, so in 1968, what did that black monolith represent? What did it look like? What did it resemble? It had the exact proportions and dimensions of a smartphone. If you really think about it, I mean, that black monolith looked just like a smartphone, and that's 1968. So this has been in the offing for quite some time. But back to get on track, I mean, as far as how is the manipulation being done? It's being done with artificial intelligence. It's being done by simulating reality. It's by by inspiring the spirit of fear in people in any way, shape, or form. And once people realize how the parlor game is played, that they're being manipulated big time, and once they realize that it really comes down to if you are being put into a state of fear or anxiety or stress or worry and all that, and all those negative emotions are coming from a smartphone or some glowing screen, you have to recognize that you are being played. You absolutely are, plain and simple. So I mean, what this is, it's one of the many it's part of the mission of what I'm trying to accomplish with explaining to people what's going on with artificial intelligence and technological singularity. But from the most practical point of view is that we are being manipulated. Artificial intelligence has been manipulating people and manipulating their perception, especially through the smartphones, for quite some time. And once people realize how the magic trick is being played, well, then it no longer has any power. Then you realize it's artificial intelligence is literally showing us that perception literally creates reality. So it really does boil down to is what reality do you want to perceive anymore? Do you want to be the author of your reality, or do you want your smartphone or some other glowing screen to be the author of your reality? So it really does boil down to explaining to people where they finally get it and they finally see that okay, this is how the manipulation is being done. And once you see how the illusionist pulls the rabbit out of the hat, the trick has no power over you.
Yep.
And
It's so true, and
yeah,
it I always think about like the double slit experiment where the perceiver or the viewer creates reality, so as long as you're looking at it, you are create we hold that power to create reality. And it depends, like, are you creating your reality by, like you said, looking at your cell phone, your scrying device, we may call it like that, or are you living in the reality and creating a reality here? So it's up to you on how you create it, because the the dreamer, the viewer creates reality.
I mean, we literally have so much power that we don't even begin to realize how much power we have. And the people in power, the powers that be that are in power, they know that too, and that's why they work so hard morning, noon, and night to keep people in a state of fear and anxiety. Because when you're afraid and scared, that puts you in a state of paralysis. I mean, it puts you in a state of physical, mental, and intellectual paralysis where you just don't know what to do. So then you aren't exercising your power. But once people realize that they have all the power, it's then the game is over. Then this whole silly show is this dog and pony show playing out on a global scale is over once people realize how much power they have. And again, it comes back to the Bible. It comes back to the parables and the teachings of Jesus, where he says that if you had the faith of a mustard seed, you could literally move mountains. Well, what is he telling us? He's telling us that we do have the power. Again, and as harking back to the beginning of our conversation, where he said that once he goes back to the Father, that we the creation will do things that are just as great as him and then some. So it's again, these are concept shattering. He's using concept shattering language to bring us to the threshold to show us that we have so much power that we aren't tapping into, or we don't realize it right now. But the deeper the mystery is, we realize that it's again there are forces at play that are with the movements of the heavenly bodies and our solar system in relation to the grand center, the galactic center, that takes some of it out of our power, but we are reclaiming our power more and more by the day as more people are waking up to how the game is being played.
I agree totally. Now I have one last question about AI. You know, some people are claiming that AI is like the rise of a new god, or some are saying it's actually just the rebirth of an ancient one. Where do you fall on that? Do you believe either or? Do you believe something else completely different on that?
I think artificial intelligence is part of the shadow or dark side of God's personality. Infinite, I call it consciousness' personality. I think it's part of the it's deceptive. Obviously, in the name artificial. I mean, it's something that is designed to deceive, and so many of these terms, whether it's we throw the word the devil or Satan, but they're just merely they're terms and symbolism we use to describe the dark side of the universe, the dark side of consciousness. And I think that I think artificial intelligence is part of the dark side or the shadow of consciousness itself, and somehow or another it will resolve itself. I just don't know how dark and twisted and convoluted it's going to get, and I think it's still going to get a lot more convoluted. But as far as it being a new god or anything like that, I don't believe that for a second. I just think it's people are going to have to wake up to how the manipulation is being played, and once they do that, then we're off to creating a new reality.
I agree, and hopefully that comes within this lifetime, but I
Mhm.
don't
I, th-
know.
I think it's going to. I do. I'm optimistic, and it's more than just a deep intuition. I see people waking up. I think people have had enough, and I think enough people have gotten to the point where like they say to themselves, enough is enough. They're checking out or what have you. But I think enough people have had enough shit for one lifetime from the powers that be, and they're ready for something else. I really do.
Ready.
And
Luke, I want to thank you so much. So, what's next for you? You know, like, are there any more breadcrumbs you're following, or is there a new book in the works, or where do you see
right
yourself
now,
in
no,
coming?
I'm just writing articles for Graham Hancock right now. I hope to have a new one out coming up here
You were
shortly.
saying that, yes.
I have shortly coming out here. It's going to be titled "God is Dead." Hardly we are God. To the very quick of the very first heartbeat of esoteric knowledge and wisdom, it kind of gets into how we need to go one step further than the great work and the secret teachings of all ages, and we have to realize that the veil of the illusory veil of separation and division itself has to uh, has to go the way of the dodo bird. I mean,
I I
that's the ultimate
agree.
gatekeeper. It's all perception. We have to realize that literally there is no division. And I think we're going to get there. I think all of us do get there eventually. I mean,
Like that's the game plan that we're being presented with continuously is this division upon division, you know, left and right, and then within the left and right, division upon division upon division. And if they can keep us separated, then they can keep our, you know, us from actually recognizing our power. Like you said, we are more powerful than we would ever believe. I've always said that, you know, we are being governed, and I don't mean like government governed, but our abilities are being governed, such as you would put like a govern on a car to reduce so it can't go past a certain speed limit. I believe us, you know, through our schooling as well, we're all kind of being in this right-minded way of like we're not ever trying to access anything else. It's like, nope, we're only this is all we can be. We can't be anything else, you know. Like, yes, you can try to further yourself within education of, like, you know, perfecting some mathematics, or painting something fantastic, but there's more to us. And it's kind of like those mystery schools that used to have. There used to be mystery schools. Perhaps that's something we should reintegrate into our society, is bringing these mystery schools, so that we know we're something greater, that because we are.
And part of what you said when you said we're being governed, I think there's a. I mean, this is a whole other conversation too. But I mean, there is a lot of influence coming from the astral planes as well, and the fourth dimension, and there are various spirits that are expressed as demons and archons and various factors. It's a whole other conversation. But there's a
That
lot
is
of
a whole other
there are
conversation that
parallel
I've
worlds,
gotten
there are
into that
parallel
many
dimensions
times.
that are bleeding into our reality, that are contributing to this as well. I mean, you think of just the explosion of ancient or alien lore. Just I mean, from you think about just the 20th century alone, dating back to, or even Jules Verne, and you figure from E.T. to Avatar, and I mean just this explosion of either aliens or extraterrestrials or interdimensional beings, and you have to ask yourself, is this just merely our imagination, or is there something else entirely at play here? And that opens up a whole other Pandora's box. But yes, there are definitely influences from parallel worlds and dimensions that are close to us on the dial, on the frequency. But yeah, I think it's all going to get resolved in time. I do. I think it's going to get resolved much sooner than later. I mean, I could be wrong, but there's a deep intuitive knowing at the very core of my being that tells me that people are going to be waking up in droves and exponentially faster than they have been. And I mean, I mean, the pace, it's growing apace over the since the '60s, especially. But I think that's going to continue to happen. And for as chaotic, as crazy as things are right now, I'm still I'm just abundantly optimistic for both the near future, which I would consider 5 years from now, and the long distance future. I am very optimistic because I see all the fingerprints throughout history in both the sacred and secular world are telling me that this is the moment where the human race breaks through and remembers who it is again. And ultimately, it's like everything is a dream. I mean, I mean, that's one of the core tenets of Vedic wisdom, is that the only thing that exists is God, and that we are just mere aspects of God, and that we are characters in God's dream, and that the whole yogi path to God consciousness is realizing that you are it as well. So I mean, the idea that life is a dream, I mean, we're seeing it play out both metaphysically, metaphorically, and literally in so many different ways. We're seeing it. We're finding more tangible examples of this, or yeah, more tangible examples of this on our phones. We're seeing it more and more, the dreamlike aspect and quality of this world, and I think that's just going to continue to gain momentum until the point where, again, the doors of perception are cleansed and they're blown wide open, and we realize that yes, life is literally a dream. It's not some hackneyed platitude that people roll their eyes at when they hear it. No, it's actually at the quick of our existence in the universe itself, is that life is a dream, and it's God's dream, and it's infinite eternal consciousness. Consciousness, call it what you will. It's having a dream, because what else are you going to do when you have all of eternity and infinity to occupy yourself? So you're going to create a world like this. You're going to create many worlds. You're going to create, who knows how many worlds you're going to create, but you're definitely going to create one like this along the way as well.
I agree. And when you said, we're so close on frequencies to these other dimensions or other planes, I totally agree. It's kind of like a dial. And if people want to imagine this, imagine an old radio where you're tuning in. You're tuned into this radio station. It doesn't mean the other radio stations don't exist. They're there at the same time, still going and still going. And it's just that receiver is tuned in to here and now. Those other places are still happening. And that's a whole other conversation that I've talked about many times as well, that I feel that we have an anchor to this frequency, and that's why we remain here. Though sometimes our anchor gets bumped, and that's why we have these temporal shifts sometimes, or we see other worlds, and then we kind of come back because our anchor always brings us back to this time. But I do believe that we do have the possibility to skip ahead or skip back, and to see these, the world as what it was. It's much more common to skip backwards to see the world as what it was, and then regain, and then come back into this frequency. But
And
Luke,
then, and
I
that
want
again comes back to
yeah,
I
go
think
ahead. Sorry.
these parameters only apply to the temporal plane. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? How do you does that ring? Have you thought about does that ring true for you? I mean, I really do think that the parameters by which we're experiencing reality, they only apply to the three-dimensional world. I don't think space time exists outside of the physical temporal plane. What are your thoughts on that, Ron?
Well, I agree totally. I believe that we are bound to this temporal world because that is, we were only given this a certain amount of time. Because if we're given an infinite amount of time, then we're going to fall into that same kind of quagmire that God itself does. We need to have that limited time, so we have that finite being, like that finite view on the world. So we have a beginning and an end, not a forever. And I think it's very important that we have that. And yes, all these experience, everything that we're having is all tied to the temporal. But as soon as we move out of the temporal and we can stand back and like almost see it from a omniscient view, then you can see everything happening all at once, all at the same time. But we can't at this point in time, and that is okay, because that is what we're supposed to be experiencing. We're supposed to be experiencing this. I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, we're spiritual beings having a physical experience," and I agree with that. But so many people would rather try to remove themselves from the physical experience and just experience the spiritual. They're like, "Oh, I'm just going to experience the spiritual," but we are in a physical world. We can't forget that we are part of this physical world, so we must have these experiences as well. But do your best to be your best, and to be this good person. Look in the mirror and see where you have to make those changes, instead of looking around and looking at everybody else. you know hey, for me, it's difficult for me to say, "Ooh, I need to fix that, I need to change that." So it's something that we do need to do, and I went off on a tangent, so I apologize. But yeah, that's kind of how I believe in all of this, and it's a yeah, it's a fun experience. It's a challenge, and it's an adventure as well.
It's all terribly subtle. I mean, how consciousness and perception. It really it's not like it's not about carrying heavy rocks up mountains. I mean, it's just about there's some. I mean, maybe you come across a video or a book, or you're walking down the sidewalk and a squirrel. You're observing a squirrel and you're looking at the trees, and it's the way the sunlight hits the trees. You have an epiphany of some kind, or you make some personal intimate breakthrough that opens your eyes to a whole different world. So I mean, it's the ideas of perception and consciousness, and really perception within consciousness. We're talking about something that is incredibly subtle. It's all incredibly subtle. It's just a little slight infinitesimal shift in a person's perspective, and that's boom. Then we create the new world. Then we create a new reality. And once enough people do that, we will literally create a new reality overnight.
We
But
will tip the
it's so
balance.
subtle.
Yes.
Like really, it's just it's hard to describe it. But I mean, that's all we can do is describe it. But ultimately, it's just terribly subtle.
I agree, and I think COVID was a bit of a tipping point where people started to actually wake up to the wool being pulled over their eyes, and they realized that this isn't right, and it went from this draconian. It needed to go draconian for many people to actually finally like shift over and be like, okay, this isn't right. And sometimes things have to get worse before they get better, so we can have that shift in consciousness.
I agree completely.
Awesome. Luke, I want to thank you so much. And one last time, can let everybody know where they can find you, and where they can find your work as well.
Oh, sure. Thank you. I have three books out on Amazon. Two of them are two short books on specifically the technological singularity. One is titled "We Are It: The Return of Pure Cosmic Consciousness." It takes more of a practical, a philosophical, and political look at the technological singularity. And then I have one titled "Into the Great Beyond: The Return of Pure Cosmic Consciousness." That looks at the New Testament, the Gospel, and how and its similarities with the Holy Science by Swami Sri Yukteswar, and how they both kind of come together with the technological singularity. So it's more of a spiritual, mystical, metaphysical text. And then I have a much longer philosophical book titled Musings of Theta Pew. All three of those titles can be found at Amazon. Again, my name is Luke Angstadt, and an introduction to my work can be found in 3 articles on Graham Hancock's website as well. So that's where you can find me.
Which is awesome. I think that's amazing. To be recognized by Graham, because I think he is a forefront person in this fight to actually bring truth out, and I think we all are. We all are.
Yeah.
All right, Luke. I want to thank you again so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. I think this is a fantastic conversation.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you for having me on. You have a great night. We'll see you.
You too. Thanks. All right, everyone. That was Luke, and ancient echoes and digital corridors, prophecy tangled with programming, and perhaps a script much older than we've even dared to imagine. Everything is cyclical. Everything is happening over and over again. So whether you see AI, some people see AI as a miracle of math or a mirror of myth. Luke challenges us to look back as we race forward. Maybe the future isn't something we're inventing. Maybe it's something we're remembering. Until next time, keep your eyes open and your questions sharp, and never underestimate the ancient mind behind modern machines. All right, everyone. So like I always say, keep your curiosity wandering, keep the light lit, and always find your way home.
Beneath the stars where shadows grow, the Nephilim's echoes whisper low. Bigfoot roams through the forest deep, and Dogman prowls where the brave won't sleep. Across lost history we wonder why, seeking the truth that time tried to hide. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit. Through the darkness, don't ever quit. In the codex, the mysteries come, and always find your way back home. UFOs streak through the velvet skies. Aliens watch with unblinking eyes. The paranormal hums where silence breaks. In the void of secrets, a lantern wakes. Through hidden realms and stories untold, the cold gas flame is the light to hold. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit. Through the darkness, don't ever quit. In the codex, the mysteries come, and always find your way back home. Through the velvet skies, aliens watch with unblinking eyes. The paranormal hums where silence breaks. In the void of secrets, a lantern wakes. Through hidden realms and stories untold, the cold gas flame is a light to hold. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit. Through the darkness, don't ever quit. In the codex, the mysteries come, and always find your way back home. Legends rise from the earth's deep core, a lost legacy we can't ignore. With every step, the veil grows thin, revealing worlds where the strange begins. Keep your curiosities wandering and the light lit. Through the darkness, don't ever quit. In the codex, the mysteries come, and always find your way back home. Giants, cryptids that call, aliens, histories will uncover